She wasn't loyal to you. She was loyal to what you provided, the comfort, the illusion, the escape. And when those things stopped serving her, so did you. Most men never see it coming, because we don't fall in love with women. We fall in love with the role we're finally allowed to play: protector, healer, savior. But none of that means you're loved. It just means you're useful. Machiavelli warned that loyalty is never moral, it's conditional. And yet, every day, men mistake obedience for affection. They believe presence equals purpose, that kindness buys permanence, that suffering must mean something sacred is happening. But here's the brutal truth no one tells you. She wasn't your destiny. She was your advantage, until the cost of keeping you outweighed the benefits. And when the trade ended, so did her affection. This video is not about blame. It's about waking up to the pattern, the illusion, the quiet war on your self-worth. Because if you don't learn to see her loyalty for what it really was, you'll keep confusing being chosen with being calculated. There's a certain silence that follows betrayal, not loud, not violent, just the echo of a realization you didn't want to face. She didn't stay for you. She stayed for what you solved, what you softened, what you supplied. You weren't her man. You were her function. She smiled at your effort because it fed her comfort. She praised your dreams as long as they paid her emotional rent. And when you stopped performing, she didn't get angry. She vanished, as if your exhaustion erased your existence. You confused her proximity with love, like a man starving for warmth will call any fire a home. But closeness is not connection. Attention is not affection. She stood next to you, but she was never with you. She just needed shelter until the storm passed. It's a brutal thing to admit. You were loyal to a role, not to reality. She didn't lie, not with words, but she let you believe she stayed because she saw you, when in truth, she stayed because you saw her. This is what trauma does. It teaches you that being needed is proof you matter. So when someone leans on you, you feel valuable, even if they're draining you, even if they only come around when the roof starts leaking. Machiavelli knew the truth. People are loyal to their need, not to your soul. She didn't betray you. She completed the transaction. You were the bridge. She crossed. And when the land looked better on the other side, she didn't look back. So here you are, mistaking emptiness for heartbreak. But this isn't about her. It's about the part of you that believed service would save you, the part that confused sacrifice with intimacy, the part that kept giving just to be kept. Now look again. She didn't abandon you. She outgrew your utility. You were never her purpose, just a temporary ladder, one she burned on the way up. They told you kindness was strength, so you gave, even when it cost you. You forgave, even when she didn't ask, and you stayed, long after you stopped feeling safe. But here's the truth no one dares say. Your kindness became your leash. You thought love meant enduring, so every time she crossed the line, you moved it. You called it empathy. She called it permission. What you thought would win her over just made her stop respecting you, because you didn't say no. You just disappeared into your yes. She didn't love your goodness. She loved your silence, your inability to say enough. She fed on your compliance, and you mistook that hunger for connection. But there's a name for that. It's not devotion. It's consumption. Machiavelli warned us, mercy invites manipulation, and the man who leads with softness only will be ruled by chaos. You weren't rewarded for being noble. You were punished for not knowing when to stop giving. You thought love made you a better man. She made it a better trap. Every time you swallowed your truth to avoid conflict, she learned she could cross another boundary. You became her safe space, not emotionally, but strategically. You didn't protect the relationship, you just made yourself easier to manage. And this is the wound most men carry. You think being good makes you deserving, but goodness without limits is self-erasure. You don't earn love by becoming invisible. You earn resentment, because even she won't respect a man who disappears. Real kindness has claws. It draws the line. It protects the sacred. It says, I love you, but not like this. But your kindness was just a disguise for fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of being unloved if you stopped serving. You fed the beast. You thought it would protect you, but you weren't the master, you were the offering. And by the time you realized, she had already lost interest, because the leash she once pulled no longer needed to be held. She didn't fall for you. She selected you, like a tool from a shelf, not because of your essence, but your availability. Not because of destiny, but convenience. You were never chosen. You were used. You thought it was fate. The timing, the chemistry, the signs, all perfectly aligned. But that's the thing about projection. It turns patterns into miracles. She didn't appear at the right time. You were just finally tired enough to ignore the warning signs. Romantic fatalism blinds discernment. When you believe someone was meant for you, you'll explain away the red flags like they're spiritual tests. She wasn't mysterious, she was inconsistent. And you turned inconsistency into a love story. Machiavelli knew better. Appearances are weapons, not truths. She seemed deep. She seemed kind, but every mask is tailored to its target. And you needed to be needed. She ran her calculations quickly. You didn't ask hard questions. You overextended, over-explained, over-offered. And she thought, perfect. Not because she loved you, but because you'd bend. A man who doesn't vet love like he vets threat will mistake flattery for loyalty. You assumed being wanted meant being valued, but need is not love, it's leverage. And she used it to steer your soul like a rented car. There's no romance in being the backup plan with benefits. But that's what happens when you lead with hunger. She saw your need and dressed it in attraction. You mistook her calculation for affection. And now you call it heartbreak when it was just exposure. You were never her story. You were her setting. The background that made her feel centered until a better script came along. Now you sit in the ruins asking what went wrong. But you already knew. You just didn't want to say it out loud. You thought she changed, that one day, without reason, her warmth turned to cold. But people don't just switch off. They shift when the math no longer adds up. She didn't stop loving you. She stopped benefiting from the role you played. You blamed betrayal, mood swings, outside influence. But the truth was simpler and harder. Her loyalty was never unconditional. It was a currency tied to your usefulness. And when the value dropped, so did her devotion. This is where most men stay blind. You interpret emotional distance as personal failure instead of strategic recalibration. She didn't leave because you failed. She left because the trade no longer served her future. Machiavelli said it with brutal clarity. Allegiances shift when risks outweigh rewards. You weren't betrayed. You were reevaluated. And the verdict was replaceable. You saw affection, she saw investment. You felt love, she calculated leverage. And once the emotional interest rates dropped, she cashed out, not with a bang, but with a slow, silent drift into apathy. Stop romanticizing the exit. She didn't walk away in pain. She walked away upgraded into a version of her life where your sacrifice was no longer needed. You weren't left. You were outgrown strategically. You expected permanence from a temporary alignment of benefits. But relationships built on roles, not resonance, always expire. She didn't kill the love. She just executed the exit plan that was already outlined in her silence. The only surprise was yours. So stop mourning loyalty. It never existed beyond the incentive. And the wound you're carrying, it's not just about her departure. It's about the man who stayed the same while she evolved past needing him. She looked at you like you mattered. She laughed at your jokes. She touched your arm like it meant something. But attention is not affection. It's just the shadow affection leaves behind when it's faked well enough. You craved her presence like a drug, not because she saw you, but because she didn't leave. The nervous system learns to worship scraps when the soul's starving, and she offered just enough spark. to keep the illusion of fire alive. This is the modern wound. You confuse dopamine with connection. The ping, the text, the glance. It simulates intimacy, but it doesn't soothe the ache. It sharpens it. Machiavelli would call this power through seduction. She didn't have to love you. She only had to keep you guessing. A man addicted to hope will betray his reality. He'll write poems about a woman who never wrote back. Her attention was bait, not malice, just method. She needed influence, reassurance, distraction. You needed meaning. That's why you hurt more than her, because for her, it was a tactic. Real affection builds over time. It doesn't rush. It doesn't vanish when it's not mirrored. But you weren't taught that. You were taught to chase the chemical, the spike, the validation, the high. And so you kept running, even after she stopped walking. She offered sparks. You imagined fire. You called it connection, but it was just chemistry misread through desperation. You made her attention mean something it never did, and now you're grieving a ghost. This is your mirror. She didn't use you. You used her interest as proof of your worth. She didn't promise love. You assigned it. And now the silence feels like betrayal, when it was always just reality. You told yourself silence was noble, that holding back was restraint, that being unbothered was power. But your stillness didn't protect you. It exposed you. Because what you refused to say, she learned to ignore. She didn't cross your boundaries. You never drew them. And when she tested your limits, she found none. That wasn't respect. That was quiet surrender dressed in masculine pride. Avoidance looks strong until it's mistaken for agreement, and every time you swallowed your truth to avoid conflict, she learned. This man won't fight for himself, so she took more. Not because she's cruel, but because you gave her permission to. Machiavelli warned, unspoken power is unreal power. What isn't declared is dismissed. You thought composure would inspire loyalty, but indifference doesn't breed connection. It breeds confusion and then contempt. She needed to feel your spine, not just in action, but in language. She needed to hear, no, not like this. That crosses a line. Instead, you chose detachment. You confused emotional control with emotional absence. But silence is not neutral. It's read as permission. You let her shape the rules because you wouldn't speak them, and now she runs the game. You thought strength was not reacting, but real strength reacts, with precision, not panic. A sword unsheathed is not peace, it's forfeiture. And you forfeited yourself in the name of stoicism. She crowned herself queen, not because she earned it, but because your throne was empty. And the day you finally spoke, it was too late. The kingdom already belonged to her. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. You didn't choose her because she was right. You chose her because she was familiar. The chaos, the silence, the volatility, it echoed something buried, something you swore you'd healed but never dared to name. She wasn't your mistake. She was your mirror. The embodiment of a wound you normalized, and the more she hurt you, the more it felt like home. Carl Jung said, "What you do not integrate, you will project." You called it attraction, but it was repetition of a pattern you inherited, not designed. She mirrored your fracture, and that's why you couldn't walk away. Machiavelli might have called it fate, but not in the way you hoped. Fate doesn't send you angels, it sends you symbols. Warnings, disguised as lovers. You told yourself she was different, but deep down, you felt the pattern. The same fights, the same withdrawal, the same emptiness after closeness. She wasn't new. She was the echo of a lesson you still refused to learn. A man who doesn't govern himself attracts chaos to do it for him. She was never too much. She was the exact weight of your unclaimed shadow. Her mood swings matched your silence. Her games matched your indecision. And that's the tragedy. You weren't tricked. You were seen, by your own past, wearing a new face. You think she broke you, but all she did was expose the parts of you already in pieces. Healing won't come from hating her. It will come from seeing her for what she really was, not the enemy, not the answer, but the reflection of the man you abandoned to become desirable. She leaned on you, depended on you, cried to you when the world was too heavy. And in that dependence you felt seen, but it wasn't love. It was usage wrapped in affection. You became essential, not as a man, but as a resource. Your presence wasn't sacred, it was functional. You were the charger, the fixer, the emotional janitor. And when you broke down, there was no backup version of you. This is the codependency trap. You mistake burden for bond. The more she needed, the more you gave. And the more you gave, the less you existed, until all that remained was usefulness, not intimacy. Machiavelli would call this a strategic alignment, not a relationship, a transaction. She didn't stay because of who you were. She stayed because of what you solved, and when you stopped solving, she stopped staying. You became exhausted, but called it devotion. She drained your fire and said, "Thank you." You carried her weight and whispered, "This is love." But it wasn't. It was self-abandonment disguised as service. She never asked about your dreams, only your availability. You became a walking apology, always ready, always forgiving, and you thought that made you good, but it only made you disposable. Being needed strokes the ego, but it kills the soul. It rewards your presence, not your essence. And when your presence fades, so does her loyalty. She left not because she stopped caring. She left because your exhaustion no longer served her comfort. You were never loved. You were managed until your depletion became inconvenient. And that's not heartbreak. That's revelation. So now you know you weren't chosen because of who you are. You were chosen because of what you could carry. And when you broke, she left, not in cruelty, but calculation. But the real question isn't why she did it. The real question is, why did you believe you had to earn love by disappearing? Why did you let her attention become your mirror, instead of building one inside yourself? What if everything you were looking for in her was just what you abandoned in you? You don't need revenge. You don't need another chance. You need a resurrection, not of the man she used, but of the one you betrayed to keep her. And that begins now. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and continue this journey of brutal self-knowledge and emotional freedom. Before you go, if this felt like a wound finally given a name, wait until you see what happens when love itself becomes a negotiation. In the next video, you'll realize she didn't fall for you. She calculated the leverage. Machiavelli saw it coming. Did you?